Hey guys, it's Silver Snorlax, and if you're watching this video, that probably means you watched my last video involving BGS cross-grading. And if you didn't watch that video, there's a link there in the description, so please feel free to check it out. Basically what I did in the last video is I showcased a bunch of BGS slabs that I had collected and was planning on submitting them to PSA to have them cross-graded and see where BGS and PSA kind of stack up on grades. Before I really get into the grades that I got back, I do need to explain how that grading process actually works. I need to debunk myths that I'm sure a lot of people will be either confused about or there's this preconceived notion that this is how this works. Basically, what I need to explain is that when you submit cards in for cross-grading, PSA doesn't look at the previous grade and then go, well, if it scored that specific grade, then it's going to be this grade under our system. They don't look at something like that. What happens is when the cards are submitted to PSA, somebody else does the paperwork on them and takes them out of the slabs and then submits them to the graders, who then grade it like it's a brand new card. In a nutshell, they look at it, they say, okay, we're going to grade it the way we use our system. They don't look at the previous grade from the previous company. That's completely out of the equation. Additionally, something I should mention, because I hear this all the time, a single person looks at the card and deems the grade, and then that's just the end of it. That's not how it works under the PSA system either. There is a minimum of 2 people that look at the card, and they have to come to the same conclusion, the same grade. Otherwise, it goes to a third person who is the tiebreaker. So really, there's a minimum of 2 people involved in grading of every single card, and they do not know the previous grade for when they do cross-grading. So now that that's out of the way, I can actually get into the cards themselves. What I've done, and they're in the same order as they were in the last video. What I've done is they're obviously in the PSA slabs now, but what I have is a sticky note attached to each one that gives the BGS subgrades as well as the final grade. So that final grade is from BGS on the sticky note, and then we'll look at the actual label from PSA. So we're going to hold this in a little closer here. We're going to look at Latias. His subgrades, or her subgrades I should say, were 8.5, 9, 8.5, 9.5. They were looking at, BGS looks at centering, edges, corners, and surfaces. PSA does the same thing. They just don't post the subgrades. They just give you that final score. So under the BGS system, this Latias was a 9, mint 9. Under PSA, it comes back as a near mint to mint plus 8.5. So that kind of tells me a little bit right away that this particular card, PSA downgrades it a little bit, probably because of these subgrades. It looked at those 2 factors and said we need to bump it down to an 8.5. So that's why it didn't score a mint 9 like it would under the BGS system. Next card up, something else I should probably explain. BGS has a couple of different grading levels. They have a mint 9, like I just showed you. Then their next level up is 9.5. That's considered gem mint for them. Past that is a 10.0. That's considered pristine. PSA doesn't have a pristine level. They just have gem mint. So I know a lot of folks, you'll hear on eBay in particular, gem mint 9.5 from Beckett or BGS. Is the equivalent of a PSA 10, and really that's the theory I want to test here, is see how true that actually is. So here we have all the subgrades straight across the board, 9.5 under BGS, that's gem mint. PSA grades the same card, also a gem mint 10. To be fair, PSA doesn't have a 9.5 subgrade. You're either a 9 or a 10. So interesting to see that in this case that holds true. The gem mint 9.5 is the equivalent of a PSA 10. Moving on to the next card, I had a Magneton graded. Really the same deal. The only difference here is that this one actually scored a subgrade that was a half point higher. So Gem Mint 9.5. Let's look at what PSA graded it. Comes back as a mint 9. So here's where we have some discrepancy between grading card companies. What exactly were they looking at from the Haunter to the Magneton? I think it's interesting to note this card scores perfectly pristinely under the BGS system for its surface score. Still Gem Mint 9.5, but it scores perfectly on surface, which tells me BGS, they're a little looser on their surface score. They don't care about it quite as much, but it's interesting to see all these other grades were 9.5. So In that situation, there is a complete difference of grades when the two were graded. Let's take a look at this one. This is a Hitmonlee, first edition Hitmonlee Hollow, Judgement 10 or Judgement 9.5, excuse me, under the BGS system. Under PSA, however, it is Judgement 10. So that's really interesting to note that we're looking at the same thing that we looked at with Haunter, is that all of these scores are 9.5 and bumps it up to a 10. So I did have another card graded. Here's something interesting to look at. All right, we saw with the previous couple of cards, 9.5 subgrades, all 9.5 subgrades equal to Judgement 10. Now, if we take half a point away from that, it's still considered Judgement 9.5 under BGS. If I take a half point away from this, what does the card, does it stay at a Judgement 10 for PSA, or does it bump down to a Mint 9? Well, PSA graded at a Mint 9. This tells me that PSA, while it doesn't necessarily look at the surface too as hard as BGS does, it does look at that corner score very, very hard. If your corners aren't perfect, it does bump your card's grade down. Obviously, I do need to point this out as I'm stating these things, that the sample size I have here is very, very small. It's 7 cards total. Really, to get an accurate read between BGS and PSA, you would need a sample size of at least a couple hundred, I would imagine. But this is interesting to note that even with the small sample size I have, there seem to be some consistencies with the discrepancies, if that makes sense. The fact that I have a 9.0 subgrade versus other cards that have 10-point subgrades still results in the difference of a solid grading point from PSA to BGS. Last two cards I had graded, the subgrades and the final grade from BGS were identical. Centering was the only thing that was off by a half point, and everything else had a pristine 10, and BGS gave it a pristine 10 as well. I'm going to remove these so you guys can take a look. Both cards scored Judgement 10s under PSA system. Interesting to note that those corner scores were perfect, 10.0s from BGS. So I think, again, that kind of falls in line with my theory a little bit, that that corner score really alters and affects the grade of your card from PSA to BGS. So that's all the cards that I had cross-graded from PSA to BGS. Did talk a little bit about what happens discrepancy-wise between those two grading card companies, the corners in particular. I would like to say that the edges also are a factor. I've theorized that for years, but unfortunately I don't have a card that can really prove or validate that claim. All of the edge scores, I believe, were 9.5 or higher, and they all came back to Judgement 10. With the exception, of course, of Magneton, where we're not quite sure. All those subgrades were 9.5, with the exception of Surface. So interesting stuff to look at. I would love to do more cross-grading. It is something I would like to point out to you guys before I end this video. I do see this quite a bit, and it always kind of makes me nervous, especially on eBay. You will see a lot of sellers post that the BGS 9.5 is the equivalent of a PSA 10. And as I've proven in this video, that is not always the case. It will be sometimes, but it's not the case every single time. I proved that with the Magneton, obviously. Matter of fact, half grade higher than 9.5. We did have a pristine there, and we scored a solid grading point lower when it came to PSA. So something I do see quite a bit, something to be cautious of, is when those subgrades are just 9.5 from BGS. That does not guarantee you a 10 under the PSA system. So something to note. Really interesting that I have all these cards graded and got the results that I did. Obviously, I don't have an issue with either grading company. I prefer PSA because the label sells a little higher. BGS, I've said this for a while as well, it does not sell as well as PSA. And that's just a label difference, really. That said, those of you who collect BGS, nothing wrong with BGS. They're a highly reputable grading company. I believe they're ranked number 2, number 3, something like that, right behind PSA. So they're just as good a grading card company as PSA. They just grade differently. So that's why you see a difference in prices sometimes between the two card companies when those cards have finally been slabbed and encapsulated. So that's about all I got for this video. If you guys would like to see more cross grading, feel free to drop me a comment. If there are other things you'd like to see done on this channel, in addition to PSA stuff, just drop me a line, let me know. Always interested in feedback from you guys. So hey guys, thanks a whole lot for watching, and I'll have another upload again soon.